Dr. Jessica Costa, the Director for Multilingual Learner Support with Instruction Partners, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jose.
Hey, I'm Jose Guadarrama, Director of Instructional Support for Early Literacy.
And today we're talking about classroom-based strategies for ensuring multilingual learners develop foundational skills and have exceptional experiences becoming readers. The first strategy we're going to discuss is use bridging and connection strategies to honor multilingual learners, primary languages, and prior knowledge. One of the ways that we do that or can do that in classrooms is by sharing sounds or words from the student's primary language to help them make a connection.
For example, when learning or practicing the initial sound that T makes, I could tell Spanish-speaking students that they probably have heard that sound before in words like teléfono, which is Spanish for telephone. When I want to bridge, I can show a picture of a telephone and ask students to say the word in Spanish. Then that would also stamp the similarity between the sound in both languages. When two words sound similar in different languages, right, they're called cognates. Capitalizing on the vocabulary practice embedded in this example is a pretty easy way that we can really ensure that we're building meaning along with the vocabulary piece.
Thanks, Jose. The next way that we can implement strategy 1 would be by asking students to share words in their respective languages that have the same sound, and then repeating the word and emphasizing that sound or sound pattern.
For example, I would then ask students what other words they know that feature that sound. I wouldn't need to know what those words mean necessarily, and that's okay. I could have students give the English word if they know it. I would just hope that kiddos aren't sharing naughty words.
Yeah, we can only hope. So the next way that we can implement strategy 1 is by using resources such as language transfers, the interactions between English and students' primary languages, a document I'll show in just a second, to learn about the sounds, written representations of the words, and other linguistic components of that lesson. So I'm going to just take a moment to share my screen so that you can see that resource and we can talk about it for just a moment. So here is that resource, the language transfers. And as we scroll down, sorry if you get a little motion sick while I scroll, we get to a chart that actually outlines the different sounds and letters that are connected to those sounds that are different or the same across the language groups. So you can see there's the Spanish column. So if we're using examples for Spanish speakers, if we want to know if a sound that we're teaching is represented in that language, we can come to the chart to see, oh yes, they have that. And so it's easier to make connections. And Jose will tell us a little more about that in a minute. We can also recognize when there's a sound or sound pattern that we're teaching when it's not familiar to that student, then we can think about how do I provide some additional explicit support, which we'll also get into a moment. So I just wanted to share this as a resource. There are others available to help us when we don't know the child's language to really make connections that can help our foundational skills instruction. And then Jose, would you share an example with us?
Sure. So when I'm preparing a unit or a lesson for instruction that introduces the sound that T makes, I can look at the chart that Dr. Costa just shared to see if that sound exists in the student's home language.
And then in the case it doesn't exist, we can also look for other resources that include pictures or represents words with that sound in the student's language. So one of those is a Spanish alphabet book. You can do a quick search. There also might be some materials available through your curriculum and your program set of materials that do have those primary language connections.
So if I were to use something like picture cards, I can ask students to name to say the name of what is pictured in their language, and then I can repeat and emphasize that particular sound. For the pronunciation of the word with the focus sound in the student's language, I can enter the name of the item in the picture, for example, in telephone, into an application such as SpanishDict.com that translates and pronounces those words. If a sound exists in both languages, but the written form is not the same, I can provide additional writing practice with forming the new letter, which more than likely exists in the lesson that I'm already teaching. Jessica, question for you. What if a sound doesn't exist in a student's home language?
Well, Jose, strategy 3, which is to provide additional targeted support for newly taught sounds or sound patterns not in the student's primary languages, does address that question. For those watching, you may want to check out more in the strategy 3 video. The next indicator is using flexible assessment practices that take into account students' primary language influence. So I want to dig into this just a bit. Oftentimes, students' responses don't match the precise pronunciation during assessment, and the teacher can ask some additional questions to determine if the student comprehends. And then give the credit to the students when they demonstrate comprehension.
In class, this may look like, Spanish speakers or sound likes. Spanish speakers sometimes are challenged with the short I sound. For example, they see the word ship and pronounce it sheep. If I were experiencing that with students, or when I experienced that with Spanish speaking students, I would first need to figure out if students are either confusing the sound I for E, or if they're having a challenging time with making the correct sound, which is an articulation issue. I would show them a picture of a ship and ask them to write the word down. If they do it accurately, I high five them and ask them to do the same after I show them a picture of a sheep. If they do so accurately and are pronouncing both words the same, I have some pretty good information. First, I know that they comprehend the difference between the short I and the long E. However, they need more practice with articulation. I will not hold them back from new learning because they comprehend the difference. They just need some help with shaping their mouth and tongue placement when they make these sounds. If this came up in a formal assessment, like an end of unit test or Ames Web or something, I treat it exactly the same as I just described. We need to keep in mind that the purpose of language is to convey understanding. In this case, there is comprehension in place, so the student should be able to move on to new learning while getting the support they need in the area of articulation.
Thanks, Jose. That also brings up just something that I think about connected to this. I am a proficient English speaker, and I also have friends who are proficient English speakers, but based on where we grew up, we might pronounce the same word a little differently. And so if we think about as proficient speakers, even our dialect, our regional dialects, or even our language varieties that we speak of English, they can influence how we articulate. And so we don't want to hold a student back if that is the case for proficient English speakers. We want to, like you said, focus on meaning and really celebrate their successes while understanding this is a process. It's going to take time, that some of these students are hearing these sounds for the first time compared with their peers who have really been using and hearing these sounds for multiple years. And so with that, we have that patience in place, knowing that we can spiral those skills later, even outside of foundational skills instruction. We can take any learning opportunity to continue to reinforce those articulation gestures with students on those specific skills, but we want to continue to push them to progress towards reading proficiency and accelerate that as fast as we can. And so we move them forward when we know there's comprehension. So thanks so much for bringing that up. And just thank you for your general classroom practical applications, Jose. For anyone who is watching and wants to hear more about these classroom-based strategies for centering multilingual learners in foundational skills instruction, please watch our other videos and download the resources linked in the description of this video.